Welcome to the With Pride and Grit podcast, a show dedicated to helping you navigate a season of transition in your life. I'm your host, Jen Pasquale, and as a 16-year military spouse, I know firsthand how challenging life's transitions can be. I also know it's an opportunity for growth, discovery, and new beginnings. In this season of With Pride and Grit, we're sharing stories of military spouses who are or have successfully transitioned to civilian life. We'll also hear from experts who can offer valuable insights about transition resources available to support a spouse's journey. Whether you're just starting the transition process or already well on your way, this podcast is for you. We hope to provide you with the knowledge and inspiration to make the most of this new chapter in your life. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Today, I'm really excited to talk about a resource from a slightly different perspective. We know that sometimes in transition, the marriage can have its own challenges and its own stresses. And so I'm excited to bring Lindsay Cavanagh in to help us kind of think about what could we do to kind of transition ready our marriage, hear from her perspective of what can work, what does that look like, and what are the things maybe we hadn't even thought about that we may want to consider as a couple before we head into that potentially hard season. Lindsay, I'm really happy to have you here and really grateful that in spite of it being the end of the night for you and the beginning of the morning for me, we were able to make this work and be able to bring your perspective into this conversation. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So why don't you start off for folks who maybe aren't familiar with you and your work, just give us a sense of what you have your hands in right now and how you're currently supporting the military community.
Yeah, I love it. So I am Dr. Lindsay Cavanagh. I am a psychologist and military marriage coach. I worked as a psychologist for the military for a long time. I want to say 14 years. And I realized that these are my people. And really, COVID showed me that there's just so many limitations and barriers when it comes to the system, as I call it. And so I've now branched off and I'm able to serve people in a much different way as a military marriage coach, doing a lot of the same things and just really helping military spouses, veteran spouses, anyone living this kind of life have the marriage that, they really desire and that they feel good in every single day.
And help me with your story. You're also a military spouse?
The most important part. Yes. So I am a military spouse myself. My husband is active duty Navy. He has been in it will be 17 years this year. And so we are getting closer to the end as well.
Yep, you'll have your own transition story here at some point. Like everybody, eventually we all transition out.
That's the thing. We can't all be in it together. It's such an important topic that I honestly feel like people don't have until you're there. And I think it would be so much easier if we started having these conversations so much earlier in the process.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And that's part of what I think Pride and Grit tries to encourage spouses to do is just figure out what you can start early and be able to prep yourself for what may come. But I would love if you could paint us a picture for what you think when you think about transition and we think about marriages. What are some of the big challenges that you have seen in your clients and in your prior work that really present during that season?
Yeah, so if you just look at marriage overall, the biggest things that kind of cause issues tend to be like big transition points, moving, loss, retirement for civil, right? So all of these things, the military, we go through all of these a lot. And I think that the strain that just transition puts on anything, if you think of any sort of transition, even like reintegration from deployment, and it's just while you're acclimating to a new normal, which transition is the epitome of that, of what is this new normal? What is that going to look like? How is it going to look like? Am I going to like it? Tends to put a lot of pressure on a marriage because we go through those kinds of periods very differently, and what we need during those periods are might be very different, and how we need it and all of those things. And unless we're really upfront and talking about that and recognizing it, it really can lead people to feeling very alone on an island while they're going through this really tough time. It can feel like you're actually working against each other. So I just find that there just can be a lot more conflict in a marriage during these times, which makes the transition that much tougher.
For sure. So when we think about that conflict, I think while we can't necessarily avoid everything,
Yeah.
if we're trying to put our radar up for some of the ways that we interact within our marriage that could sort of be problematic, if you will, what are some of the things that you see couples really struggle with during that time where there's a lot of stress on them and they're trying to both kind of navigate this identity shift that's happening?
I think one of the biggest things that I see is that people expect that their spouse knows exactly what they need and how they need
Mhm.
it. And the reality is, we're really bad at that. Even couples who have been together like 24 years, they research shows that they're still not great at it, especially when you're talking about these transition periods. And so often we don't even know exactly what we need because it is all new. Things
Mhm.
are so different. And so we go from, of course, they're not going to know if I don't know. And so I think that that tends to be a big point. They know that what they need isn't happening, and it becomes this personal, like, you don't care, you don't want to
Mhm.
help, that sort of thing. And now you're on even just a different path than what actually is happening.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about one of the other interviews I did. We talked about how much that communication is really
Mhm.
the make or break, if you will, in that experience. That as long as we can talk through things openly and honestly and safely, then we've dealt with a lot. We can probably get through this hard season as well. But that communication tends to be the thing that really can trip us up a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of specific tools or ideas for if someone is entering this transition season and maybe they feel like their marriage is, we're doing okay, like we've weathered the hard things, like we're okay,
Yeah.
but they really want to figure out what they could do to just sort of maybe not proof, but transition, protect, if you will, that relationship and that communication. Are there any specific tools that you find really helpful for couples?
Yeah, and believe it or not, the place that I have people start is really on their own. And I have even couples do this separately, but really think about, what are the things that you're most nervous about when it
Mm,
comes to going into that time. I like having people think about what you're most nervous about, what kinds of things you expect to have happen, even the exciting things. What are you thinking that period is going to look like? I'm even going to just give you a deployment example, right? If you have one person coming home from deployment who thinks like, we're just going to relax and do nothing, you have the other partner that's saying, we're going to go out, we're going to try out all the restaurants, we're going to make up for lost time, right? Now you're going to be really disappointed. And it's just because there's two different expectations. So, really thinking, what are my expectations for how I want this period to
mm,
go, what I want life for us to look like? So I really have start doing that on your own. And now you come together and see, like, how similar are these pictures, and the places that are the same, awesome. Like, now you lean into those because you're already there, but you don't need to spend a ton of time on them. The time that you do spend is, where are you different, right? Where are do you, fears matching up or not matching up? Where is what you're thinking it's going to look like differ from your partners? And really start, like, it just, now you know the direction, the
mhm.
to-dos, the path, so to speak, of what you might see down the road as a potential issue.
It's a great place to start looking inward and figuring out what it is you want to need and being able to put that on paper and own that.
Mhm.
What advice do you give spouses who may feel like their service member is still in sort of survival mode in terms of their career and they're really finding their service member struggling to prioritize those almost emotional conversations instead of focusing on the logistical parts of transition?
Yeah, I think that One, I remind the spouses that it's how the system sets up that time. Like the just sheer amount of appointments that you have to go to and check boxes you have to do. And it's astronomical the things that we ask people to do towards the end. And I think that it gets really hard to do the emotional stuff because they're literally having this list of
Mm.
1,000 things that have to be done. And so I think it's not necessarily even like an avoidance of it. It's just it's down the to-do list, and we still have all of these things ahead of time. And it's also not something that the military really ever has supported, right? Military is trained to be very rational and to leave
Mhm.
emotions at the door. And so it's just not something that is going to come really naturally. So for spouses, the thing that I like to do is really make sure, again, sometimes you are just the only reminder that needs to happen. And so starting to talk about things, hey, I know that this time can be really hard. I've heard from other spouses. And are there things that, that you are worrying about? Are there things that you just like getting that started? And if they don't know, then that's great because now you know where you're at and
Mm.
where they're at, and it's figuring that out. Like, how do they even feel, and how do we create that space so that they can even figure out how they feel about it? I think so often we, again, logistics, and okay, this is going to be great and I'm going to live here and I'm going to do this, and but no one really thinks about, unless you do stuff like this or you listen to podcasts like yours, the your whole identity is going to
Mhm.
change. And what is that going to mean, and what is that going to feel like, and how weird is that going to be? And so just starting to talk about it, and I listened to this and I read this, and what
Mhm.
I'll do a lot is just throw something out there and see what comes up without any expectation, and then go with it from there.
No, I think what I heard in what you were saying is this interesting perspective of it can be easy in that season where, as the spouse, maybe you are a little more in your emotion and you're a little more in kind of thinking about how all these things are going to impact the marriage or the family. And it could be easy to make up sort of a story about how your spouse, your service member spouse is not doing that. And
Mhm.
you feel like they should be doing that,
Yes.
but they're not doing it because they don't care about those things or because they don't want to be part of that dialogue. They may not have room in that moment to automatically think about it. But if you can create that opportunity for the conversation, then it may come on its own and you can get some of those stories validated as either maybe
Mhm.
inaccurate or um so I don't know if
Yeah.
that's been your experience.
Totally. Working with active duty, because that's primarily what I was doing when I was working for the military. And I think that no one had ever asked these questions, and they were even surprised like that this was something that they've had to do. The skills that they've used their entire life, like all of a sudden aren't going to be the thing that is going to get them through this.
Mhm.
So it even that in and of itself is really scary. And okay, I'll go and do this checklist. I'll go to this medical appointment. I'll go here because it's just easy. I can do that. I think just having a lot more compassion, having a lot more empathy for both of you going through this, even for us spouses who were used to this, we're used to seeing the bigger picture and
Mhm.
all of this, it still is something that's unknown, and you might want it to go a certain way, but it's still, I don't know for sure. And so just really being okay that we don't like things that we don't know, right? We
Mhm.
like to be in control as human beings, and so it just, people are going to react to that differently, and some may avoid it. It's just, there's so many different types of ways that can come out.
You know what I was thinking about as you were talking, like our experience is we're not in transition and yet we are because we have a date, we have a timeline, and yet we're not moving. Like we deliberately came here early in order to
Love it.
stay here and have the kids stabilize here. And it feels like there's some elements we're getting to do early, if you will, right?
Yes.
We're starting to do some of those things a little bit sooner because we have just a lower up tempo and there's the space for it. But one of the things that I have found really challenging unexpectedly, and I would love your perspective on just ways to kind of deal with this, is the kind of the redefining of roles and kind of the
Mhm.
renegotiating of just living. Because what I found is that after almost 17 years of marriage and almost 19 years in this life, I felt like I really didn't know how to be a teammate in the way that I wanted to be a teammate. I just
Yeah.
was so used to having to do it on my own and being willing to do it on my own, that then to broaden that circle and figure out how to bring someone else in was harder than I thought, because I've always been operating in, oh, you're headed out the door, or oh, you're headed in the door. Those are the two modes, right? And so it's
Mhm.
never a practice of, oh, you're here and you're not, and you're here long enough that I can actually hand things off and not expect you to have to hand them back. Because I
Yeah.
think that was always the thing. It's why, am I going to really hand this off to you if you're just going to hand it back to me in 6 months when you walk out the door? What's the
So
value
true.
in that?
Yeah.
So I'm curious if that's been, I'm hoping I'm not the only one, but
Yeah.
I'm just kind of
Definitely not.
curious if you've seen that, and what's the advice for spouses who really want to renegotiate kind of the distribution of things now that they've got access to their service member all the time, but they don't even know how to do that, and their service member might not really even know how to step into that. What does that look like for couples?
Yeah, so I kind of go back to like a premarital counseling kind of thing. At that time, and even if it wasn't counseling, but just at that time of the relationship, you're really defining roles. Like you're starting to talk about who does what chore and how does this look, and you're just open and you're talking. And honestly, a lot of that is really what needs to happen now. Like
Mm,
going in, we are starting a brand new relationship situation and we need to negotiate like what that looks like. So, what are your expectations for what you want this to look like? What are my expectations for what I want
mhm.
this to look like? And even I'm gonna have a hard time like remembering to that you are there and can take it because I'm just so used to it.
Mhm,
Here's how you can help me remember. Here's how I can help you remember to step up, right? Really
mhm.
talking about all of those things super openly. And on top of all of this, I think it's really important to have a solid mindset. And I call it my marriage mindset, where we're just really focused on us together and how we're doing this as a team. And because it's so easy to be like, he doesn't want to do this or she doesn't care. Like, we can really start to, and now we're on opposite sides versus doing this thing together. And so I think that's also important. So making sure your mindsets are like, we may not be good at it, but we're going to still do it together and work
Mhm.
it until we figure it out. And then really starting to just have those like early new relationship questions like,
Yeah.
what chores do you want to take on now that you're going to be home? Like that kind of stuff.
Right. Somewhere I saw something that was having a giant whiteboard and actually like listing out, because I think to some extent, and this is certainly true for myself, there's so much over the years that I've just absorbed as a thing that needed to get done. And I don't even think of it as
Yeah.
something I would write down unless I'm forced to. And so the exercise was just like actually like writing out, like, what are all the things that it takes to make a house function? There's things we took on that our service member or spouse doesn't even necessarily realize, perhaps. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
by actually putting those things on paper, you start to see, oh, okay, this is frankly how imbalanced things might be. What does it look like
Yeah.
to bring it into a little bit more balance? What are my strengths and how can I focus on those tasks? What are your strengths and how can you focus on them? That's certainly
Mhm.
my lens for it. But I thought it was such an interesting exercise because I was like, I can't even imagine if I get into some of the more minute details of just like making sure the dog is up on her vaccinations, like just small things
Yeah.
that I've been doing that I can
Yes.
easily hand off, but he's never going to think to ask, hey, can I take over the dog? But if I said, hey, could you take over the dog? He'd be like, sure, I can take over the dog. What does it look like? Tell me
Well,
about it.
and even
Educate
like,
me on what you've
oh,
been doing.
but even like decisions about things, right? Like I know that I often just will make decisions of
Mhm.
certain things because I know that I'm the one that's going to be here, the one that's going to execute it. And
Yeah.
I think even, and maybe I'll tell him like after the fact or this, but it still is like it has to be something that I know that I can do. Whereas when he's not in the military. That isn't going to work necessarily. It's
Mhm.
not like I will not want him involved in those, but it's like muscle memory at this point, right? Can
Yep.
you guys do this? Yes, because I'm free, but oh, now I have to check with somebody else. And
Yeah.
so those are those like little push button things you don't necessarily think about ahead of time, and now you have a ton of those all happening all at the same time, and so that's where the friction and the conflict
Mm.
come from.
Yeah. I was thinking about looking at the spouse for a minute. We talked a lot about the
Yeah.
marriage, and I think this probably could apply to the marriage as well. From a transition perspective, as folks are trying to ready themselves for this process, when would you suggest they kind of start having these, what are my values? What are my expectations? When would you advocate for those conversations?
I think that honestly, you start having conversations about just the future now as soon as you can, and it doesn't have to be the specifics like you're going to be doing during actual transition, but my spouse and I already now are having the just what do we want life to look like what kinds
Mhm.
of where would we want to live when we have
Mhm.
choice, what choices do we want to make, and now those might still change now between when we actually transition, but I think that we still already now have some of those under our belt and have kind of some ideas. And all we have to do now is update them. So you're doing all those other checklists, you're doing all the other things, and we at least already have a lot of that. So I think there's never a too early point to at least be looking somewhat long term after the military. Like, just let's just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
When it comes to now, okay, it's getting closer. Again, I think as soon as you have an idea, if it's for sure going to be 2 years out, like just start whenever. And I just think that the more time will never hurt. One of the things I think that happens is people wait until the actual transition has happened, until they're out of the military, and then it just all comes in all at the
Mhm.
same time. So for some people, it's really overwhelming. Okay, so great, you do one thing, one small thing once a quarter, and but then start really early. For other people, it's like I just am going to do it all at the end, and so really thinking about what feels best for you. But I just think as much time as you can give yourself, the
Mhm.
better.
And I was thinking back to something you'd said earlier in terms of at what point how do you know that it might make sense to pull in a third party if you're just struggling through some of these conversations, but you want to be having them?
Mhm.
How does that work for folks you have worked with so far? Is everybody really waiting until those ruptures have happened and their struggle, or what is it? Obviously it's probably better to address it early, but I'm just kind of
Yeah.
curious when folks come to you what the balance of that is, if it and what does it look like if they really do that early and have that third person early to help work through some of these conversations.
Yeah, I think that I do get a lot of the "we're in it, it's hard, it's bad,
Mhm.
help me fix it" situations. And honestly, I think this is really just how our society treats getting support for our marriage.
Sure.
It's still like you don't air your dirty laundry. You don't, if you need support or counseling thing, you're, ooh, you're really bad, when really we should be treating this stuff like oil changes for your car, right? It's just
Mhm.
maintenance to help. So every now and then I think that we're just, as people are talking about it more, as even just mental health is starting to become a little bit less stigmatized, you hear the people that reach out. And so I say it kind of depends on, do you want it to be the checkup, tune up, solidify things and make it easier, or and both can happen, but I think that it just, one might make it a little bit easier from the beginning, and one just helps to fix whatever has happened at that point. But so there's not a
Would
right or wrong.
Sure, no, of course. Would you advocate for if a spouse has a service member that is a little more resistant to that, would you advocate that that spouse go ahead and do their own work with a third party, if
Mhm.
you will, and then just walk that road and see if they can bring their service member in later? Or as I've said, I certainly talked to folks where that's a challenge, where there's some of that kind of
Yes,
historical resistance from the service
totally.
member. And if things aren't completely imploded, it feels, no, we're good. Like we've weathered a lot. We can weather this too. And I
Yes.
think there's less of that lens of, "Oh, but could we make it a little bit easier?"
Yeah, so I specifically say that I do one-sided like marriage support, meaning like I'm just working with
Mm.
one of the couple. And I do that because I don't want anyone to feel like I have to wait until my spouse is on board and willing to feel better. And to me, after doing this for as long as I have, it's been 14, 15 years now. If you look at a marriage, it really is a circle, and each person is bringing in their part, and you just work off of each other. If things are going in a pattern, it's because of that. And so when one person changes, the
Mm.
other person really has no choice but to also change. And they don't even have to know that they're doing it. They don't even really, right? If I'm giving the person, like, hey, why don't you ask this question in this way? Like, it decreases defensiveness. It really helps. Like, we'll get that answer. Now we'll figure out what's next, right? So you can really do a lot of those kinds of things and not now. I have some where both are on board, and I think that's fantastic too, but I just don't think it's necessary to still have the benefits that you wanna see.
No, I love that. I didn't realize, I actually didn't know that you really
Yeah,
focus more on kind of that, the individual, the spouse, and then let them bring that into the marriage and take those lessons, if you will, forward. I think you're absolutely
yeah,
right. It is hard to have one person change without the other,
yeah,
noticing or benefiting in some ways from that, right? Because that better communication that they might have continues to just build on itself.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, talk us through a little bit. If someone was interested in doing that kind of work with you, we brought you in because I know you're a great resource in this space. So, what would that look like if someone was interested in that?
Yeah, so I think the best way honestly right now is I have started using an app. It's called Voxer.
Mhm.
As it allows for text messages, voice messages, and I use this on an unlimited basis. So people can contact me whenever, however, as much as they need to. And
Oh,
what I
wow.
like about it is I'm actually working with people when they're in the middle of the thing, right? In the
Mhm.
middle of that anxiety about whatever's going on, when they're just coming out of a fight and still feeling it, or maybe they're still in the middle of it and not really knowing what to do. And to me, now I can intervene at that moment versus having to wait. Oh, so 2 weeks ago we had this fight, and trying to remember what happened and talk about changes and things like that. So I find that actually we get a lot accomplished in
Yeah.
by doing that. So what I do is I just do these on monthly kind of
Okay.
packages, so just 1 month at a time for that unlimited access. And I think that it really helps to set the stage, help set the foundation for how are we going to work through this. This is also really good again for people who are, oh, we didn't get support and now we're really struggling, or we just want to get started and I don't know where to start or how to do that or what to ask or that kind of thing. So I find that it really fits either way.
Hmm.
And I will add on calls for people that want to, but it's worked so well for me. It's one of the benefits of, again, getting out of the system. It can
Mhm.
kind of create something that really works for us.
Sure. And so, if folks wanted to find out more information, is
Oh.
your website just the best place for that?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, lindsaycavanagh.com. They can also find me on Instagram at Married to Military, but and I'm in Japan, so sometimes that initial call to talk about this, because I do have a free call where we can even just see, is this going to be a good fit? Is this going to benefit you, and or is there a different resource? Because really that's what I care about the most, that
Mhm.
people feel cared for and get what they need. And so reach out to me and you can find me from my website, and we can find a time to chat and then see what the next best steps are.
I feel like it's so like a military spouse to come up with this really creative way to meet people where they are and help people in the way that works for them and works for you.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard anyone that kind of approaches it in that way. So I think it's a really interesting model. I'm glad I can recommend that out and know a little bit more about it. So I really appreciate you coming on today and talking us through who you are and how you do what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I think that even when we've been in, is depending on when you're doing the transition, but if you've been in for a long time, like there still are always resources that we just don't know of. And so I think
Mhm.
that's why like your podcast is so important. It's just bringing all of those resources to light that are there and willing and waiting. It's just learning that they exist.
No, for sure. No, we're really grateful and look forward to sharing it out within the community. So thank you, Lindsay, for hanging out with us so late at night.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm excited just to watch your transition progress too. I've been following you for a while as well, and it's just fun to kind of all of us will be doing it at some point.
Right.
So I'm excited for this next step for you as well.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thanks.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the With Pride and Grit podcast. We're so grateful to our guests for sharing their stories and expertise with us, and we're grateful to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And we always appreciate you sharing us with a friend or leaving a kind review. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find us on social media under @Pride and Grit or on our website, prideandgrit.com. Until next time, please remember you're not alone on this journey, and it is our privilege to walk alongside you.